Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome along to the Crash MotoGP podcast. On the show today, we're looking ahead to MotoGP returning to Australia and Phillip Island playing host for the first time since 2019. Some of your questions answered, and we could be crowning our first champion this weekend, courtesy of Moto3. The recording day is Tuesday, the 11th of October. My name is Harry Benjamin. Joining me as ever is Crash's MotoGP editor Pete McLaren and former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen. But first, we wanted to pay a couple of tributes. Firstly, to Chrissy Rouse. We reported in last week's show the 26-year-old BSB rider had received serious head injuries in a crash during a race, and sadly he succumbed to his injuries and passed away. A massively young, talented racer, brilliant podcaster to a man who was doing it all, really, taken far too soon, and our entire thoughts are with his friends and family at this extremely sad time. And unfortunately, it's been a sad couple of weeks in the world of motorbike racing, as Phil Reed, the first rider to win Grand Prix World Championships in the 125, 250 and 500cc classes, has also sadly died at the age of 83 peacefully in his sleep last week. And Keith, well, as I say, it's just been a sad couple of weeks really in motorbike racing.
Yeah, I mean, what to add to that, Harry, to be honest with you. Chrissy Rouse, it's rare that somebody is as universally popular in the paddock as Chrissy Rouse obviously was. Very sad situation. I mean, we weren't aware when we came on air last week that he wasn't going to make it, although we knew it was serious, obviously. So the loss has come as a shock, even though, some people might have been prepped for it. But a disaster for the family. And it seems like every single person that ever knew him throughout, the very rare people, in motorbike racing, you kind of build up rivalries and you build up that kind of friction with other people. And Chrissy seemed to be just universally loved by everybody he'd come into contact with. So it was kind of one of, and you mentioned the podcast, which is, anybody that's never seen that podcast, it's hilariously funny, like so natural. And he was actually quite a shy boy originally, but he came out of his shell. He was obviously a quick runner, stock 1000 champion in 2020. A big loss. What else can I add to that? Phil Reed, superstar, the Prince of Speed, as he was known. I always liken Phil Reed as a rider to be a bit like Jorge Lorenzo on track, I'm talking about, not off it, in that his class on a motorbike, he just had something very, very special about him on a bike. He really was a quality world champion. And controversially, off track, cameras and newspapers used to follow him around everywhere. Reedy was not shy in pushing the boundaries when it came to what was acceptable at any particular decade that he was performing, shall we say, for want of a better thing. I mean, he puts a smile on my face. Reedy would turn up at an event that you wouldn't even expect to see him at, and he'd sidle up alongside you and have some scheme, some financial thing that you needed to, or I remember bumping into him at a wake of a very good friend of mine, John Brown, who was a motorcycle journalist for some time, and Reedy turned up and he was trying to sell helicopters or helicopter parts. It was random as hell, but that was Reedy. Expect the unexpected from the Prince of Speed, but a big loss. And if you go back through the history, in some cases I would say Phil Reed was a sad situation. It didn't, he wasn't a wealthy man at the end of the day. He was kind of overlooked from all the accolades that someone of his status should have got, purely and simply because he was so brilliant on a motorcycle. But there you go. Gone but not forgotten, I think will be the way that we handle that one.
Absolutely. Well, all of our thoughts and everybody's Crash MotoGP's thoughts with the friends and family of Phil Reed and, of course, Chrissy Rouse at this extremely sad time. But we'll carry on with the rest of the show and look forward to another weekend of MotoGP racing as we get into the crunch stages of this championship. And, last time out, Thailand, we've had a little bit of a break now, haven't we, to recover from the back-to-backs, it seems. We had so many races in a month. And Miguel Oliveira, well, our latest winner, Pete, another win for him in the wet as well last time out. Sensational ride from him, I think it's fair to say. Hunted down Jack Miller and then managed to get through on him and take a commanding win in the end. At a time when, he was hunting down the man that's replacing him at KTM and has given him a bit of a warning about that KTM team, saying he won't find it particularly easy. Do you think KTM and Miguel Oliveira, that split, it seems like neither of them really wanted to part ways entirely, because KTM were trying to keep him in that Tech 3 fold. So do you think there might be a bit of regret over that decision with either party there?
I mean, certainly any time a factory loses a multiple race winner, I mean, he's won more races for KTM in MotoGP than any other rider. So I'm sure they did desperately wanted to keep him. But at the end of the day, as you say, they signed Jack Miller in his place. And that meant that, Oliveira had to leave the factory team. They wanted him to go to Tech 2 and the Gas project. But he instead has decided to make this new start at RNF and Aprilia. As wet weather wins, I mean, they show the rider talent, don't they? It's the chance for the rider who maybe isn't comfortable with his bike in the dry to it's almost like a reminder, this is the talent I've got, this is what I can do if we can put everything in place. And unfortunately for Oliveira, but also the other KTM riders, they haven't had the package this year, really, have they? Brad Binder's another example, having to fight his way through, from qualifying outside the top 10 quite often. He's not really been able to show his true talent either. So it's a difficult one. I think it's a good time for Oliveira to make a fresh start. I think he can make this new start at Aprilia. It's a bike that's very consistent. I think that's what he's looking for, isn't it? We know on his day, when the conditions are working, if it's a wet race, he can be at the front and can win races. But it's that up, down, that spiky was the word that he used, those spiky results. I think he's now going over to an Aprilia that probably has been the most consistent bike on the grid overall. So he'll be hoping he can be, build some momentum and actually challenge for places higher up in the championship standings. If you look at where he's been championship-wise, it's nowhere near where he should be given his race results, given that he has won all these races, if you like. And it's because the results have just been up and down for him. But undoubtedly, the talent is there. And it was a reminder of what KTM will be missing.
Comes down to team dynamic at the end of the day. If Miguel Oliveira wasn't getting along with the team or they weren't getting along with him, I think trying to shove him out to Tech 3 wasn't a great. I can see why he wanted to make a move. Aprilia is on the up. KTM has stalled a little bit in the middle at the moment. I think Miguel Oliveira and the dynamic between him and the team, I think KTM is quite a harsh team. I think it's a team that second riders, can have quite a little bit of difficulty in. I think that they can find themselves out on a limb a little bit. And I can imagine the language being slightly more harsh than what he would perhaps be used to. So Miguel Oliveira, I think, is a right move for him and for Aprilia. Brilliant for the pair of them. I think we're going to see a lot more action from him next year. Jack Miller, will he find it difficult at KTM? The thing about Jack Miller is he's solid. He's a solid character. He's a solid man. I think he will fit in with the kind of Austrian way of doing things as well. And Brad Binder's a similar character. I think they're going to spur each other on. So it's probably a good move for all around. I know that sounds like Huewen sitting on the fence here, which I never normally do, but I think managerially it works well for both riders and for both teams. I don't think Oliveira would have been a good fit at Guy Coulon, Hervé Poncherel's Tech 3 team. I think he's made the right move. I think his management have put him in the right place. And I think we're going to see some sparks next year. That's for sure. From both Jack and from Miguel.
And Jack, of course, is the man on the form at the moment, isn't he? And these three triple headers, that, if you like, the triple consecutive races we just had, he's outscored everybody, isn't he? By a long way. I mean...
Why is it whenever someone's leaving Ducati, they start going really, really good?
And still technically in championship contention.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's a really good point, Harry, because providing we can add up, not like the Formula One guys, at the end of the day, we're going to get to the end of the year. I mean, he's just got married. He's on the crest of a wave after Buriram. He's going to Phillip Island, which is going to be tricky from looking at the weather forecast and the like. I mean, that is a really, really hard, brilliant racetrack, but like nightmare weather. You don't know what it's going to do from one half an hour to the next. It can be blowing in from the south and be freezing cold. It can blow in off the land and it can be 20 degrees warmer within half an hour. So that's going to take some management as well. But Jack Miller on this kind of a roll, you don't need much of a mistake from the other two from Jack Miller to be in contention, properly in contention.
Now, we talk about mistakes, I suppose, Pete, just to pick up on that and just talk about another good performer. Johann Zarco had a really good performance as well last time around, but maybe it could have been better.
Exactly. I mean, it was a good performance, but he had such a pace advantage at the end of that race. I mean, he set the fastest lap of the race by half a second over anyone else. And you've got to believe, I mean, he's been second, I think, 10 times in MotoGP now, but probably that fourth place was the closest that he's got to a win, really, because if it wasn't Bagnaia there, you can be sure he would have blasted by, the person in third who was Bagnaia and taken on Miller and Oliveira. But he obviously knew, if I take out Bagnaia, that's it. Bagnaia's had 5 DNFs. It's unbelievable, isn't it? 5 DNFs or non-scores, and then he only scored 1 point in Mandalika. So really, he could have missed a third of the season. He could have not turned up to a third of the races, and he's still only 2 points behind Quartararo. I mean, it's unbelievable that Bagnaia is still in this position. But coming back to Zarco, yeah, I think that was, you could see it on his face. I mean, I spoke to him after the race. He was saying the right things about being, it's 4th place, I'm happy with it. But you could see as he said, he lost the victory.
I want to be critical of Johann Zarco. I really want to be critical of him. I want to say things like, he had the opportunity there and the speed there, but not the confidence to make the passes he needed to make. And that worries me about a championship. That worries me about a potential race winner. Having said that, the fact is, in MotoGP at the moment, we're not seeing passes when we think we ought to be seeing them. There is something going on those bikes and with those front tyres, with that aero, with the shapeshifters, with the ride height adjustments and all the rest of it, that are causing difficulties for top line riders to make passes. And that's the reason why I'm not as critical as I would want to be with Zarco. I mean, honestly, I was furious at the time. Make the bloody pass. Get on with it. It just was so annoying to watch, particularly when you were looking at the lap times. I mean, not everybody is a nerd like we are, the three of us, all sitting there checking the lap times out and seeing who's doing what in what sector. But if, those of you at home that have a television screen over here and your computer over there with the lap times and the sector times on will have been shouting the same things as we all were. Like, you've got the pace, get on with it, get by. But front tyres just are not working the way that riders want them to work to make those passes, to give them the confidence to make those passes. Aero is having an effect. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens at this next round in Australia, because there are opportunities there to make passes, and it's going to be interesting to see whether they are going to be thwarted in that effort. Was it Zarco being too reticent, or was it the fact that he was as close to the limit as he wanted to be when he was in the proximity of another rider? Add to the fact that it was a man on a Ducati and one that's going for the championship, that would have been in his head. But he's a motorbike racer. Normally, that wouldn't have made any difference at all. You'd have stuck it straight down the inside, took the place. I've got the pace. I'm going to go. If you can follow me, fine, follow me through. So I don't know. I mean, the jury's out for me. Zarco will know what it was in his head. I've got to say that Zarco makes a few unforced errors. So maybe he's aware of his unforced error record, if you like. And so therefore, coming across Bagnaia, he just didn't quite have that confidence to make that pass and make it stick. And it's great because he can make the excuse, well, I didn't want to pass him because, for the points and the rest of it. Makes it look good within the Ducati camp, if you like. But it might also have been the fact that those motorcycles, when they're in close proximity to each other, are hard to pass. MotoGP is a class that has evolved into being hard to make passes. And I think that's something that we're going to have to get over if we're going to go back. I mean, especially when you see things like World Superbikes of the weekend, they're at it. They've got everything except, ball and chain swinging. It's fantastic
that would
to
be
watch.
Something.
Yeah, well, I mean, it literally, they are just taking chunks out of each other everywhere because the bikes are, they're able, they give you enough to be able to, work in that manner and with those kind of liberties that you're taking from each other. Whereas a MotoGP bike seems to me to be so incredibly precise now with everything that makes passing so much harder. Dump all that bloody shapeshifter stuff. I mean, if I could see where it was going to be a definite bonus for road bikes or developments into the future, but I just can't see where ride height adjusters and all the rest of it are going to make any difference to road bikes or anything in the developed future. So kind of why are we bothering with them? Even aero, I mean, something needs to be sorted regarding that because it is getting hard for the top line riders to make passes. And that's not good.
Might we see no use of ride height devices and aero at Phillip Island? There's not really hard braking, is there, to sort of deactivate the ride height devices? Will they actually use them? I'm not sure. And then
it's the first place, Pete. It's the first place, Pete, that I... Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say...
It's the first place that I remember people complaining about the aero. Bradley Smith was quite vocal about, how much it upset you. Doohan's corner, the first right-hander, is like one of those ones where you need kahunas the size of footballs. It is just the corner of the year for me. You're coming onto the straight very fast. You've got a fast straight and you've got a really quick right-hander off the straight. And we're talking to Zarco. We've seen Zarco and co get that wrong going in there when they got tangled into that right-hander with Marquez, wasn't it? I think he ended up ramming Marquez, I think it was, back in the horrendous accident. Because, again, the you never see it when you're sat at home on TV. It all looks dead easy, doesn't it? But even in my day when they had solid tyres and wooden wheels, the fact of the matter was, when you got near to another rider, you were being pulled around all the time. You could tell when you were getting into a slipstream of another rider. You'd be 20 yards back, and all of a sudden you couldn't control your hat because it was being pulled around like this. And as you got closer, it settled down. And then there's the big suction because he's cleared all the air in front, and you get sucked by. Those are, they're arts that you learn as a youngster going right the way back to the year dot. But now that you've got all this aero, I'd like to see what it looked like in a wind tunnel, how that's spread out and around, and the difference that makes to a motorcycle. Now you've got all of that. You can't see it, but those riders are coping at 200 mile an hour with inaccuracy, with the bikes being moved about. It's not voluntary movement. They're on a mission of their own half the time when you get into the slipstream or get into someone else's messy air, and that's making more and more a difference. And we're going to see that at Phillip Island. Believe me, it's going to be an issue, I believe. And if it's windy, as in from the very position of the track, don't call it Siberia for no reason on some of those corners. We've had situations, difficult weather conditions can throw up some unusual results. Cal Crutchlow won there in difficult conditions. There have been winds there before that you weren't really expecting. There have also been crashes there you weren't expecting. Down into that, I don't know what they call it now, but it was Honda hairpin back in the day. Coming down the hill into the breaking point of there, when you're running asymmetric tyres, again, are they running asymmetric tyres this week? I don't know. I haven't looked at the tyre sheets yet. But asymmetric tyres means that part of the tyre has got a different strength of compound, different compound on one part of the tyre than the other. But the problem you had was that when the weather cooled in the last half hour of one race, the harder compound was too hard for that temperature at that time. And you got riders that were losing the front all the time. Bit of a face plant into those little hairpins and stuff like that. So they've got a lot to contend with in Australia. This is not an easy... And then there's the seagulls. Do you want a seagull in the face? Let's have a 4-kilo meatball slung at you in the face at 200 mile an hour. And that's assuming it doesn't do any mechanical damage if it gets jammed in the front of the bike, which we've seen before. Blood and guts everywhere. It's Phillip Island has got a lot of things that are going to be chucked at these guys. And bearing in mind, we've not been there till 2019, so you've got the entire test program that they're going to try to cram into FP1 and 2, as well as qualify for qualifying, of course, which is the argument we always have, because nowadays, there's no guarantee you're going to get through to qualifying 2 because everybody's within a second of everyone else. So you might end up being in qualifying 1 and not being on the front 4 rows of the grid, which is going to be bad news at Phillip Island as well. So such a lot going on there.
The seagull, for anyone that wants to look at it, just type in Andrea Iannone, is it 2015, I think, Phillip Island, and they'll hear the classic Keith Huewen phrase of "he's nutted it," I think was what you said, Keith. Is perfectly summed up how Iannone dealt with that seagull. And then just going on what you were saying.
Unlike some people that would probably put the nut on it, I think he was more likely dodging it than nutting it. But anyway, he got it in the face. And that was down to that very hairpin that I was talking about, down to the Honda hairpin. He's nutted it!
He's nutted it. So last time MotoGP came in 2019, there was all the crosswinds in qualifying. I think Miguel Oliveira actually got blown off in final practice and broke his hand. So after that, qualifying for a start was then moved to Sunday morning. So it was as an upset schedule just on that alone, qualifying and then the race in one day. But also after that, the technical rules were tweaked a bit and they're actually allowed exemptions, which are to take off the side pods. It's the only race that they're allowed to do this. They can take off those side pods at Phillip Island this weekend if they want to. The teams can. They can't alter anything else on the aero, but they can actually remove the wings. So we might see very little use of ride height devices, if any. Obviously, they'll use them at the start, but perhaps not when the actual around the lap, if you like. and potentially they might take some of the side pods off as well. So it's a unique event all round, Phillip Island.
Yeah, but the problem is, Pete, that unfortunately Quartararo had a bit of a go at that earlier on in the year, didn't he? Taking some aero off of it to try and give it some more top end, and we ended up with a motorbike that didn't handle at all. I think that when you've done all the development down the road of aero and down the road of shape shifting, ride height adjustments, that then is a completely different animal, completely different motorbike, and suddenly you take all the aero off of it, and everything you've done to partner that aero suddenly doesn't work on its own unilaterally, if you like. It's a big problem. It's not as simple as just unbolting something and hoping it's going to work. And they don't have the time for testing that. You've got free practice 1. You've got to go quick either in the morning or the afternoon. Free practice 2, which is going to be the quicker of the two. And with weather conditions being a bit changeable there, you don't know which session is going to be the quick one. And actually swapping. You can have 2 motorbikes, of course, that are set up completely differently, so you can try them back to back. But that in itself has its own problems as well. So I don't know. I think Phillip Island is going to be, it's the turning point. This is the point where, there's going to be big points to grab and big mistakes that can be made, I think, at Phillip Island. This is going to be the one for me that decides it's definitive for the World Championship this weekend.
I think that's a very good point, Keith. I think, especially for Quartararo as well, because if you look at these last 3 tracks, really, Phillip Island is his best chance to take points off Bagnaia, isn't it? I mean, Sepang, they're probably roughly equal, you might say, in terms of Yamaha and the Ducati and maybe the Aprilia. They've all tested there, of course. It's not quite as unknown as the other tracks. Valencia, well, what was it last year? All Ducati front row, all Ducati podium. You wouldn't want to be Quartararo going into that race with a points gap to try and close. So really, he's got to get some points, I think, this weekend at Phillip Island to kind of... So he's got a bit of breathing room when he gets to Valencia, and really, it's going to be a tough job for him there to expect to beat all of those Ducatis. And then you've got Aleix as the unknown as well. So, I mean, massive weekend. And weather-wise, I think it's looking showers on Friday, maybe okay Saturday and Sunday, but quite cool. It's tricky conditions there.
The weather, Friday, rain, Saturday, sunny with clouds, same for Sunday, but it does seem cold. So that's the weather update for Phillip Island this weekend. We've jumped ahead. I feel like we've done the insider's guide now for Phillip Island, unless there's any other tweaks in terms. What's the surrounding areas like, Keith? What should we know about this part of Australia?
Jonathan Ray has got a house on Phillip Island. Tash comes from there, his wife. There you go. So that's a bit of information for you. It's quite a barren place. It's an unusual place. It's about 2 hours, hour and a half if you're not bothering with the Victoria speed limits, which are a nightmare. Never ever go 1 kilometre an hour over the speed limit in Victoria. If you want a nanny state, then the state of Victoria is a nanny state. There's police everywhere with speed guns. You're not allowed to step off the curb. You're not allowed to drink in the street. You're not allowed to make loud noises in bars.
All of Keith's favourite things to do.
Fact. So, I mean, the Australian way is not really the way that you might think of it. Melbourne is a nice place to stay before you go down to Phillip Island. You can stay on Phillip Island if you like. There's a road bridge that goes over onto the island itself. But San Remo, the little villagey town thing before you go over the bridge, good Thai restaurant, got to say. The lady that owns the Thai restaurant's from Udon Thani in the northeast, so Pete will be familiar with that, as I will, of course. And it's kind of one of them situations where you begin to find your way around. It's great atmosphere, not packed, not full. You can walk about. It's a bit old school. It's a bit like going to Brands Hatch, I always think, but only an even more exciting racetrack. I mean, you can wander about. The people that are there, they're all quite windswept biker types. They've all got, anything that they look like they go to the North Pole, South Pole whenever they felt like it and not be affected by it. Plenty of bikes on the island. Drinking's a no-no, obviously, in Australia if you're driving. Speed limits, you can get massive fines for doing 5 kilometres over the limit, which is a real pain. Plenty of places to eat. It's a bit of a cross between the Isle of Man as an event and Brands Hatch. I think if you could amalgamate those two, you would have the kind of the atmosphere that you would get. I think it's a proper biker's job. I mean, it's a proper bike event. The marshals at tracks, the usher you around the inside of the track. Again, you can tell they come from the state of Victoria. Can't walk this way, can't walk that way, can't put 1 inch over the white line. They're always whinging and moaning about where the pedestrians are going, and they're trying to. I don't understand what the mentality is in Victoria, but it is properly a nanny state. But the racetrack, just beautiful. If the weather was stable and a few degrees higher than it's likely to be this weekend, it's the perfect racetrack. Beautiful. Pit lane's not, by the way. Pit lane's really, really tight on the way in, and an awfully long run round the outside of Doohan's Corner. You've heard me talking about Doohan's Corner already, which is a really fast right-hander. And it always scares the life out of me when someone's coming out of pit lane, merging on the exit of Doohan's Corner. I think it's a very dangerous merge into a very fast corner from pit lane. And again, the entry to pit lane has got a horrible little sort of near 90-degree turn into pit lane. Very, very narrow. So if we have a situation where it's flag to flag, where people are changing bikes, and we've seen this before at Phillip Island, where it's been a bit of a cock-up. I seem to remember Honda making a massive mess. They were 1 lap out, I think, on the bike swap. It's a very tricky pit lane if we have that flag to flag bike swap situation. So that's something to watch out for as well.
Okay, well, and also Pete. Oh, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would count Phillip Island as one of my favourite events of the year. To be honest, I think when you consider all things, as Keith says about the track, the place, just the location of it, everything. Yeah, I think it's a real highlight of the calendar, and I would recommend anyone, if you can get to it, go to it, because it is fantastic. The weather though is the big question mark. But as they say, if you wait half an hour, it changes. So
there's always blue
Good
sky
for
somewhere.
Good,
yes.
You can go and see the penguins if you want. That I have to say, I don't recommend.
The
so
penguins.
Here we are. You go to see the penguins on the beach, and you go to this massive, great car parking area. Again, thinking what I was saying about the pedestrian marshalling at the track, it's the same for the penguins. And they marshal you into this area, this horrible area that's full of tourists, and then you have to sit in this like grandstand thing. You wait for the penguins to come onto the beach, but you're not allowed to take photographs of them. You can't do anything. You can hardly see them. So you spend like an hour and a half waiting for these penguins to pop up. They come up and say, and then clear off back into the sea. Honestly, if ever there was a waste of time and money seeing the penguins, don't bother.
Leave the penguins alone. They're just living their lives.
The penguins are all right. It's the people running it that's not.
Well, the scenery always looks amazing. I've never been there, obviously, but just from the view, the pictures you see, it looks like a spectacular place to have a race. Pretty much. But Pete, there's some rider news coming in as well for this weekend. Some returnees, I think that's the word, and some people not being there. One of them is Taka Nakagami. It seems like he's really paying the price for going racing in Japan. I know he was desperate to do it just for his home race, but he has really mucked up that finger big time. And he, again, is going to be replaced by Tetsuta Nakashima because he's got this torn tendon that he's had 2 surgeries on and still recovering. So not great news for Taka Nakagami. But on the other side, Joan Mir back on that Suzuki.
That's right. Yes, Mir. He's been out, hasn't he, since that accident, that sort of strange accident, really, in Austria. There were some rumours. People are still unsure as to whether did something actually go wrong? Was it a technical issue that caused that massive high side? No one really knows. But either way, it's as you say, it's caused him a long running problem with, I think, tendons, ligaments, those sort of things that just take time to heal. And we saw him try and come back, and then he was forced to sort of step away again. Then we had Petrucci come in for Thailand. Now he's going to try and come back again. He will have to pass a medical at Phillip Island on Thursday, but he's obviously desperate to come back, finish these last races with Suzuki before he starts this new chapter at Repsol Honda at the Valencia test. So let's hope that he is fit enough this time to do the full weekend, and he doesn't have to sort of step away again, because it's a long way to go to find out that you can't ride. And Nagashima, he's going to get another race. Good to see. He's such a polite, happy guy. Speaking to him in Thailand, he was just so pleased to be there. He's been a winner in Moto2, and then he went away from the paddock, and now he's doing this test riding for Honda. He does the Japanese test riding. Stefan Bradl is obviously the better known the Honda test riders. But Nagashima is doing his part back in Japan, and yeah, he gets another race because, as you say, Nakagami has had to have a skin graft, I think it is, isn't it, on this this hand injury that he picked up in the incident with Marquez in Aragon. So yeah, as you say, he braved his home race weekend. You've got to imagine if it hadn't have been his home race and his first home race in a couple of years, probably he would have sat that one out, wouldn't he, with hindsight? But he wanted to be there for his fans and everything else, his team. But yeah, it's going to take him a little while, and he's going to hope to be back for Sepang. But again, that'll depend on what the doctors say.
Well, we'll wait and see that. And of course, Joan Mir, that will be hopefully properly confirmed on the Friday after that medical. Just 3 races left for him before he goes on to Repsol Honda alongside Marc Marquez. But a title can be won this weekend. Moto3, Izan Guevara can clinch it. He's already secured promotion to Moto2. So that's something to have a look out for, Keith. What else have you got your eye on? That? Anything else?
Moto3 at Phillip Island is just the race of the year. Virtually every year. I mean, when I used to commentate on it, I'd almost blow my larynx out in the first 5 laps of a Moto3 race, let alone the last 5 laps. You're going to end up with 20 bikes that are going to be stuck together, and it's going to be anybody's race, as it usually is at Phillip Island. So to win a world title, if you can get it done at Phillip Island, brilliant. But I would say that there is so many variables and so many people are going to be in it to win it this weekend, as far as the race is concerned, that I wouldn't want to be the one that put money on anybody in particular there. It's just an incredible race meeting. I mean, you can be leading it out of the final long left-hander onto the front straight and be 3, 4, 5th by the time you get to the line. Finish line's a long way down the straight at Phillip Island. A lot of opportunity for slipstreaming to get it right. Some people have won it coming onto the front straight. They've just had enough room to make it work, but generally you've got 3 or 4 riders coming through that last corner and you're not going to be able to predict who's going to be first across the line. So I'm really looking forward to Moto3. I'm really looking forward to Moto3 sat on my couch shouting at it rather than losing my voice for the next 3 days.
He's nutted it. Let's end before we go on to our actually predictions. We've got a couple of listener questions that let's get answered, and then we'll do our predictions after that. And a lot last week where we had a lot of chat about Ducati Cup, Ducati GP, and Racing Armchair has asked if Pecco takes the crown. Do you agree the narrative from the tribal fans seems more about Pecco robbing it, a la Ducati Cup, rather than Fabio losing it by underperforming? Toxic Twitter seems to overlook Yamaha haven't developed where the Dukes have. Surely that's on Yamaha, not Ducati.
What you got to remember is with Twitter is that there's one person versus the 500 that are quiet. You always got someone that kind of finds a little something to tear that sheet of paper over for us all to look underneath it. We are where we are. I mean, I'm seeing more about World Superbikes at the moment with Alvaro Bautista on a Ducati that's a rocket ship in a straight line. But the fact that Ducati, if we talk about World Superbike for a split second, is faster than everything else out there at the moment, is giving us a 3-way championship race as opposed to a 2-way championship race. It's always difficult, isn't it? Do you penalise riders or do you penalise manufacturers? Where do you make the rules? Ducati have made the most out of what's available to them legally. Everything they've done is legal and above board. It's within the rules. So I will never criticise someone maximising what's available to them. I think the point of the question was is it that Yamaha have underperformed in their progress? And I think that they have. I think that whether that will happen again next year, we'll find out. It comes back to that other situation that I've been banging the drum about for what feels like 2 years of doing this with you on Crash.net, is that I believe that the cutoff point for technical innovation, for technical changes, is too soon in the year. I believe that if you gave the manufacturers an opportunity to try different things for the first 2, 3, 4 Grand Prix and then set that in stone so they couldn't make any changes from that point, it would give some of the weaker manufacturers, if you like, for want of a better word than I can think of other than weaker, an opportunity to try the things that they've got in the pipeline but just haven't been able to test properly. It's all very well saying that they've got test riders back in Japan and all the rest of it. There is nothing like having your current riders testing new innovation. And there isn't the time and test schedules allowed now in MotoGP for them to be able to test all of the things that I'm sure they've got backed up in the engineering pipeline. So something has to change at some stage. Ducati, I suppose, again, it could be argued because they've got 8 bikes, although they're not all the same, gives them an opportunity to have more data to understand what's going on with their engineering. So therefore, they are likely to have slightly more innovative ideas on their main factory bikes. Is that Ducati's fault? No, it's not. It's the way it is at the moment. Do we want less grid spaces? If Suzuki were producing more bikes, would other independent teams go with Suzuki? We've got Aprilia that have doubled their effort for 2023, which is a good thing. Suzuki dropping out has kind of screwed the whole thing at the moment. I just think Ducati are doing a great job. How many World Championships have Ducati won in recent years for the amount of investment that they've put in? You could argue with any of the big red machines in Ferrari at F1, with Ducati in MotoGP. They are the team that are putting the most resources into it and haven't got what they should have had, effectively. So who's right, who's wrong? Who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong? Ducati are doing their very best to win a world title, and they might well do it this year. This weekend is going to tell.
I think Quartararo is doing an incredible job, isn't he? I mean, you look, Morbidelli is 19th in the World Championship, the next best Yamaha. I mean, the difference, I don't think another Yamaha has even finished in the top 10 in the dry this year. I mean, the difference is just extraordinary between what Quartararo is doing and the other guys on those bikes, who are good riders. I mean, Morbidelli, title runner-up, race winner. Dovi got on it and decided he couldn't make it work. A triple title runner-up. He's doing an incredible job, but you just got to remember that quote, haven't you, from Marc Marquez after Thailand? I bet on Pecco's bike, wasn't it? And I think that, he's a rider. He's out there racing with these guys. He can see the difference. And the Ducati now, as Keith says, they put all of this effort into it. Look at the results they're getting on it. I mean, Quartararo, I think his points at this time last year, Quartararo had about 30, 40, 50 maybe more points than he's got this year. So, that shows where the momentum has gone away from them. Pecco's only about 10 behind where he was last year at this point. So Yamaha, he's doing a great job. The engine work is coming for next year, but is it going to be enough for these last 3 races? That's the big question. Then on the issue of the satellite bikes, let's take the specific example of Gresini. Gresini had the option of running satellite Aprilias or satellite Ducatis. Both of them year-old bikes. The year-old Aprilia took 1 podium last year. The year-old Ducati won races with Pecco, with Jorge Martin, with Jack Miller. I mean, which would you choose if you're Gresini? They chose the Ducati. They've gone on to win 4 races with Enea Bastianini. So this is what you're up against when you're trying to sort of even out the grid. They just want the best bikes.
I think as well, Pete, I mean, if I might make that World Superbike analogy as well, penalising the rider or giving praise, Quartararo has done a great job. He's done the job he should have been doing. For my money, the other Yamaha riders haven't. Dovi wasn't the spec that he would have been, and Dovi wasn't going to stick his neck out. His time had come. Morbidelli just hasn't been the same since he had that leg injury. I mean, at the end of the day, he's not been the same. So I would argue that they're not perhaps performing in the same way that they should be at this level. World Superbikes have this massive problem that Bautista's clearing off in the distance, and his motorbike's faster than everybody else's. But who else is doing the business on a Ducati? You've got Jonathan Rea, who was penalised with a 250 or maybe 500 RPM. I can't remember what it was now. 250, I think, originally, and then 500 RPM, knocked off the top of his bike through legislation. Yamaha are there or thereabouts with Toprak Razgatlioglu. But the point being is it's very difficult to judge. Where are their teammates? Where are the other Yamahas? Where are the other Kawasaki's in the World Superbike situation? Very difficult to make a set of rules that is going to... I mean, and the other thing to remember in MotoGP is the whole grid is within a second. Yeah, we're talking about the whole grid is within a second in somewhere like qualifying. Now that, to qualify the qualifying comment, isn't the same in a race, because if you've got a motorbike that's a little bit quicker than the others in a straight line, you are not going to be able to run your perfect line on, say, a Yamaha that's 10 kilometers an hour slower down the straight. You're always going to have someone that's going to be able to slipstream, get underneath you, and force you off your ideal line to put that perfect lap time in. So in a race situation, the quicker bike is generally going to be the one that mires the party of Yamaha. Who was the journalist that said this week that he felt that the MotoGP championship has been weakened since Marquez hasn't been in it, in that he felt that it's been fairly ordinary without Marquez being in the championship. I can't remember the exact wording to it, so I don't want to misquote someone and then name someone in it. But there is that kind of feeling in certain sectors at the moment that performances aren't quite where they should be. You know, there are some riders that aren't performing in the way that they should be performing, I think was the overall point of the piece. And you might be able to say that about your Morbidellis and your Doviziosos and so on and so forth. You know, who's not performing to their very best? We'll have a look at the analysis at the end of the year when we go through all the sheets and sheets of paper. I was saying earlier on about how our lot always check all the sector times and so on and so forth. Always worries me when I see riders put in their fastest laps right at the very end of a race, you know, like when really the bike should be worn out, the tyres should be worn out, you know, it should be just about hanging by a thread by the end when the checkered flag comes out. And you suddenly see Maverick Vinales used to be the best for that. You know, it must have driven his engineer completely mad. Then you'd look at the last two laps and he's going fast and he's been in the entire race. Well, why didn't you do that from about half race distance when the fuel level had gone down? Nobody knows. You know, bike racing is so individual. It's so about the rider. Forgive me, Harry, if I say this again. You know, Formula One, for instance, you've got this stable platform that these guys are strapped into. You put the cars really do make the difference. You know, it's a situation where you're very unlikely to beat the top car by changing the driver so much. They're all quite capable of being at that pace. Whereas I think with MotoGP or motorbikes in general is that the rider alters his weight, his performance, he moves himself around. So he makes a huge difference in how that bike will perform depending on how he is managing the package. It's a little bit more fluid in that a rider can make the difference. Whereas I believe in cars, obviously the platform is a little bit more stable. So therefore you can't make much of a difference as a driver to a car that doesn't perform. Whereas with a bike, you can make a slow bike go quite quickly if you work your way around the package, as Quartararo clearly is with the Yamaha. Riders do make a difference. That's why they get paid the big bucks. I don't know what Marquez has been paid in the past, but certainly he's kept Honda's on a high just by being somewhere thereabouts every single time he jumps on a motorbike. He's worth whatever they pay him, because to get that kind of performance out of an engineering upgrade would cost them millions and millions. So whatever Marquez gets paid, he's worth the money. Whatever Quartararo gets paid at Yamaha, he's worth the money. Bagnaia, Miller, don't know. You see, I don't know whether... I think Pecco makes too many unforced errors. We'll see if he gets over that come Phillip Island. Because if he doesn't, he won't win this title.
Darren Binder was the only other Yamaha rider to get a top 10 finish this year so far, way back in Indonesia, round 2. And he's all the way down in 22nd in the standings. So,
and without a ride for next year.
And that, yeah, exactly. And that was in the wet, wasn't it? You just lastly, because I believe, I don't know if it was worldwide or just in the UK or not, it was a Mental Health Day or something like that yesterday or whenever. And MotoGP put out a little thing about Maverick Vinales. And I remember talking about a lot about Vinales, of course, last year when he departed from, or 2 years ago now, was it? Time flies, from Yamaha and the struggles he was going through mentally. And there's been a lot of talk about, well, what is there available for riders and team personnel? And John has asked, how do the organisers deal with any mental health issues races have? Simple question. Is there anything?
That's a very, very good question. And it's really in vogue at the moment, isn't it? I did a piece with Glenn Irwin, British Superbike rider, great lad, who's clearly suffered with mental health issues over the last 2 or 3 years. And what he's had to go through to get on top of that as a top-line motorcycle racer is incredible. You know, the effort that he is self-motivated to find the answers to why he goes to as he would put it, a darker place. Maverick Vinales, we've all questioned Maverick Vinales for some time. Racing a motorbike at the top level is 90% about what's in between your ear holes. It's about how you deal with a situation, how you manage, being away from home as long as you are, how you manage physical injury, how you manage the pressure. Social media, blimey, social media can destroy the strongest of us once they get stuck into you from somewhere or the other. The answer is no. I don't think there is, Harry. And whoever the guy was that sent the question in, there isn't a specific in the paddock. There is no pastoral care. It's left to the team to manage their rider in the situation, and indeed for their rider to recognise the fact. Here's a very personal example. A very close friend of mine was struggling with mental health issues, and I tried to help them by accessing the available avenues, if you like, on the NHS and privately here in Northampton. I thought, okay, let's see what I can do for this person. And it was impossible. Honestly, it was impossible. You can ring up Samaritans, which I would highly recommend to anybody. Anyone listening to this that is struggling with it, do reach out and do try and do something that will make you feel better, whether it's speak to a friend, whether it's speak to a family member, because you'd be surprised how many people do care. And I cared for this person enough to try and do something in my usual forthright and businesslike manner. In other words, completely the wrong way of doing things. And I was shocked at how little I could motivate some of the agencies to get involved. They would only get involved if this person was to ring them up and agree to it themselves. And one of the big issues with a person, particularly a bloke, with a person that has a mental health issue, you don't want to admit it to anybody. You want to deal with it yourself. You force it back inside of you. You don't let it out. You don't want to discuss it with anybody. Unless somebody close to you recognizes it, as I did with this particular person, and wants to try and help, you're on your own. And that's the situation that most people find themselves in. And certainly in a paddock, if your team isn't doesn't have much empathy towards what might be going on in your head, then you're in big trouble. And if you try to reach out through somebody else, they can't do it for you because none of the agencies will get involved. They'll only get involved if you ring them up and say, I've got a problem, I need help. And not many people do that. And they should, obviously. It's a very difficult subject, very difficult indeed.
Yeah, it's that admitting it yourself part, isn't it? But please do, as Keith said, if you have recognized any of those issues, do reach out to avenues like the Samaritans, and I believe Mind as well as a great mental health charity to look into too. So do reach out. But with it being Mental Health Day, I thought it was worth bringing up.
Well, I think so, and I think that people like Glenn Irwin will talk to you about it, what he has been through. I mean, I love the way that Glenn is able to speak. You can follow Glenn Irwin on Twitter, and if anybody out there wants any, I'll help. If anybody needs any help, just get on my Twitter handle and I'll DM you with information that I've found in the time that I've been trying to deal with it. I think everybody has mental health issues at some stage. Saying the words mental health issues is something that, I would never have said in the past. I've had mental health issues. I didn't know they were mental health issues. I do now because I'm much older and I recognize it now and I see other people and it gets talked about a lot more. So I think we've always had mental health issues. Everyone has had a mental health issue of some kind. The degree of it, is very personal where that is. I dealt with my own and it all got sorted out and I recognize all about that. I learned my way through it. But a lot of people can't do that or aren't able to do that or don't recognize the course that they need to take. So therefore, speaking with someone else, really, really does cut the job in half. And you'd be surprised how many people there are out there. But you have got to, if you want to access, the so-called proper agencies, they're like a nightmare to access because they don't want to speak to anybody other than the person that has got the problems. And the person that's got the problems quite often doesn't want to speak to somebody that's a stranger. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, well, I think you said some brilliant things there. So I think please do reach out if you feel like you do want to talk to somebody. There is somebody who will want to listen to you, always is. So Samaritan's Mind, Keith Huewen is there if you would like to reach out. Well, as we come towards the end then of this show, looking forward to Phillip Island, have we had a little time to think about who we might be predicting to be onto the podium? Have we had some time to do
The
that?
weather.
The weather. I think it's going to be dry.
The weather win.
Right,
I know who
Pete.
I'm going with.
Well, yeah, but you're not going first though. Pete's going first. I'm forcing him to go first.
It's a tough one, isn't it? You know what? Having said that, I think Quartararo has really got to try and make the most of this weekend, just in terms of the track and the bike might be better for him than the next 2 rounds, let's say, versus the Ducati and maybe the Aprilia. I'm going to say Quartararo for the win because I think he's got to. I'm going to say Aleix second because, again, I think he's got to. I think the Aprilia goes well there. Ian Oney, we were talking about him headbutting the seagull, but sort of lesser known was that sort of 2019, ironically, well, the race before he, with hindsight, we found out failed the drug test. Phillip Island, the race before that, he was leading it on the Aprilia. I think it might have been the first time an Aprilia led a MotoGP race. So the bike, even then, went well around Phillip Island. And Aleix was a pretty good match for Ian Oney in qualifying. So I'm going to say Aleix second. And I'm going to say Jack Miller, home podium on his final race there for Ducati.
Nice. I like that podium. Keith?
Miller, Quartararo, Binder.
Oh, a Binder. Why Binder?
I've seen him around there before. I like the way he does his business around Phillip Island. I've got a feeling that, another podium for him. I mean, you might as well throw all the top names in the air and catch them because it's going to be one of those.
Yeah.
Miller is from my heart. I mean, Aussies, Casey Stoner 6 times on the bounce winner around Phillip Island, Wayne Gardner, Mick Doohan, these are absolute legends. For Jack Miller to emulate that at his home track on the week of his marriage, just call me an old romantic if you would. Oh. But I would just, it would be the perfect week for me to see Miller do it. So I'm going to go Miller. Quartararo, I think Pete's right. I mean, Quartararo's really got to do something spectacular here. I think we're going to see a lot of mistakes this weekend. And I think that's what's going to be the issues here. Mistakes in qualifying, mistakes in the race. Binder's got that kind of grit about him. And I think this place is going to be about gritting your teeth and getting on with whatever's slung at you. And Binder and KTM, I mean, he's had a podium a couple of rounds ago. So I'm going to put him on for the third.
Okay. I'm going also for a Miller win. I think that would be nice. I'm going for Aleix second, but I'm going to put Maverick on the podium in third. I think he's owed one. He's so close. He's massively improved, and of course he was pole last time we were in Phillip Island. So I think he likes the track, goes well there. And he's got good pace on that Aprilia, and he'll get out the way if he's in front of Aleix. Like he's not going to lose Aleix the title, I think. So Miller, Aleix, Maverick for me. Need I remind you both, you have locked in Fabio as your title winner. And I've gone for Aleix. So no one's gone for Pecco. So we shall wait and see.
Well, we should also say, probably, I can't remember who said it, but one of the riders said, of these last tracks, the only one that's really bad for tyre wear, if you like, is Phillip Island. And who's that guy that goes really well when the tyres are well out? Bastianini. So look out for Enea coming through towards the end of the race if it does turn out to be another real tyre sapping performance on Sunday.
Binder and the KTM aren't bad on that either.
Good call.
Yep, so just to reiterate, I went for Miller, Aleix, and Enea Bastianini on the podium. So we got that. Everyone's got that down there. Good. We'll leave it there then, shall we? And we'll look forward to the final 3 races. It is 3, isn't it? Yeah, final 3. First up, Phillip Island, titles to be decided. Thank you, gents. Make sure you're tuned in as ever across crash.net for all the latest news and analysis across the week. And then we'll be back with you next week to look back and forward at everything that's going on. As ever, get your questions in, leave them in the comments section, tweet, Instagram, Facebook us, just search Crash MotoGP. Please do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts as well. And we'll see you right back here next week. Bye-bye.